So many things are happening in Syria and it's happening so fast. So let me help you better understand in a most simplified way who are the bad guys and who are the good guys. Who are the players involved in that craziness, madness that is happening right now in Syria. I mean, there's so many videos surfacing right now that I can't share them because they're so horrific. I can barely even talk about them. There is videos, the radical Muslims there, the government is live streaming themselves as they're making elderly men walk like dogs on their knees and bark in front of their families just before they execute them in front of their children and their grandchildren. Just imagine yourself watching your grandfather, watching your father go through that. They're grabbing women and they're stepping on their head and then killing all their family in front of them just to leave them watching that. Sometimes they kill her, sometimes they leave her alive, sometimes they kidnap her as sex slaves. And they're doing all of this with the same joy and glee in their eyes that we've seen Hamas do when they did October 7, when they massacred the Jews. The same spirit, the same mentality. I've received some chats from people in Syria that are telling me that for a long time already that they're afraid that Syria, they're saying basically that it looks like Hamas have taken over Syria and that is the new government. While they're fooling Europe, making it look like a moderate Syria, but on the field, on the ground, in practicality, it's just crazy. So without further ado, let's dive in and see who are the players so you better understand. So all of the bad guys are Muslims. Not all the Muslims are bad guys, but the entire chunk of bad guys is basically different Muslim radical factions. You have Al-Qaeda, you have ISIS, you have Al-Nusra, you have Al-Sham, you have the government, which is kind of Al-Sham, you have different pockets of Alawites that still holding alliance to Assad regime and want to fight, and a lot of different startups of radical jihadists. This is like the startups in the Muslim world. They have a lot of radical jihadists starting and popping up the same rate like Israel is having technology startups, but it's a different kind. So that is the bad guys who are right now raging havoc and terror in Syria and who are trying to genocide and eliminate the Alawites, the Druze, the Christians, and every possible minority that is not radical Islam or is not Sunnah in Syria. That is what's happening right now. Now, everything that you're seeing in the media now happening started because, well, it's not. That's the excuse they're telling us, because a group of Alawite that are loyal to the Assad regime came and attacked a few soldiers from the Syrian Al-Qaeda government that is running the government or the country right now. And then the Syrian decided to take revenge on the Alawite. They were waiting for that, and they just went and started killing them in the thousands. Last I heard was 1,300. That's already more than October 7. But I just read a comment. I'm not so sure about it, so I'm going to say it that way. I've just read that there's probably around 7,000 Christians and Alawites and some Druze, but not many, if any at all, actually, that have been murdered by the radical Muslims in Syria. When I say radical Muslims in Syria, I'm not talking a minority. We're talking about a majority. So that's a big difference here. In the good guys group, you have several, well, basically it's all minorities. There's few Muslim minorities there, but mostly non-Muslim. You have the Druze who are standing strong, tall, and proud, and who are the least affected so far by the radical jihad. Not because they don't want to, they tried, but the Druze pushed them back and fought them back. But most importantly, Israel came and sent a message: don't touch our Druze brothers. You do that, you're done. And Jolani and his guys, step back. Power and respect works wonders in the Middle East. Now, the Druze have started their own belt, kind of in the southern side of Syria, and they came in and said, that was the sheikh of the Druze, the religious leaders of the Druze in Syria came and said, while witnessing the genocide that is happening among the Christians and the Alawites and other minorities, the Kurds, and they said, anyone who is looking for shelter, who is escaping these radicals, can come to our mountain and we will protect you. You will be under our protection. Now, the only way they can dare saying that also, well, they'll probably said that before, but now they have the whole strength of Israel standing behind them, telling them, Druze, we have your back. You are brothers. The Jewish people telling the Druze, you are our brothers, we have your back. You've been loyal to us for so long, we're going to be loyal to you. That's insane. Just let that sink in. That's an enemy country. And Israel is telling an enemy country, a minority there, that we got your back. Now, in the chunk of the good guys, you have the Christians who are persecuted, heavily persecuted right now, being killed right, left, and center by the Muslims, and they're fighting for their survival. And then you have the Kurds who've been fighting strong and brave for a very long time, who probably paid the biggest, the heaviest price in all of this war in terms of having their daughters being kidnapped and made sex slaves by ISIS, by Nusra, by the government, by Al-Qaeda, by anyone there, by all the radical Muslim factions. And then you have the Alawites. The Alawites, the Alawis, they are Muslims. They are a Muslim sect, you can say, that is heavily influenced by Christianity and other different religions. And they came as a branch kind of from the Shia and started their own group. Now, the things with the Alawites, Assad was Alawi, but Assad was a very, very evil person, and he surrounded himself mostly by people from the same Alawite community that were also very evil. Because you see, you don't become the biggest drug lord in the history of mankind, bigger than Pablo Escobar probably, while kidnapping your own country and having them work for you as slaves and creating mass graves for the hundreds of thousands and killing and eliminating more than 1 million people in your own country by doing it by yourself. I can assure you that Assad was not shoveling with a shovel all these mass graves. He had a lot of help, and a lot of this help came by the people loyal to that regime, and many of them were the Alawis. So they're not really good, but that doesn't mean that all of them. See, many of them were just born into that reality, and Assad was a very evil man. He was just bad for everyone, including the Alawis and the Druze and the Muslims and the Christians. He was just bad for everyone, except for a small group that he was kind of less bad for them, and they lived in fear, and they were probably as evil as him and just worked in that like very evil, radical Muslim environment. So the Alawis now, what happened is the Muslims came and said, we're going to genocide them. We're going to go and kill them all. And they started butchering them by the hundreds, by the thousands. Women, children, elderly, people who are literally genuinely innocent. And now we're starting to see their cry. And I want to differentiate again. Not all Alawis are part of the Assad circle, but they don't care. They're using that for an excuse. I'm talking the radical Muslims, the government, and going around and killing them in the streets. I've had messages from Syrians that are telling me that they're afraid to go to the streets. They're afraid to go out of their house. They're afraid for their children, for their daughters. Some of them have been asking me if it's safe to go to the south and take shelter and refuge among the Druze. And they said because we feel that that's going to be the only safe place in Syria, and that's the belt in the southern part of Syria, from under Damascus basically down all the way to the border with Israel. Let that sink in. The only place that is stable and safe right now for anyone who is not a radical jihadist in Syria is thanks to Israel and the Druze, not thanks to Europe. Kind of America is helping. I gotta say, you know, there were Americans bombing right now, jihadists and Al-Qaeda guys in Syria, but mostly thanks to Israel and the Druze. Wow! What happened to all the apartheid state? What happened to all of calling Israel all these bad names? I mean, that kind of goes against that agenda, right? But anyway, so to help better understand, and this is how it's going to become very relevant for you. You see, because if you're watching this and you're in the West, in Europe or in America, we love to think always that in all these Muslim countries, the failing one, the bad guy is the leadership, and then all of the people are innocent. But you see, don't become a leader of an evil Muslim country because everybody's innocent and you're the bad guy. You will never become their leader. You need to be as bad as they are and even worse. And what happened is people don't like to hear that, but that is the truth, and I'm very sorry if the truth offend you. But there's a lot of really bad people in countries like Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine. Sometimes even the majority end up being bad. In October 7, more than 60 to 70% of the Palestinians, after watching the live video streaming of killing and burning families alive and beheading thigh workers and I don't know what, they still said they support and they rejoice and they want to do that again. So that's undoubtedly a very bad community. It's crazy how much they're supporting terrorism and how much they're supporting the same violence and the same kind of spirit that rejoice in the suffering of others. And we're seeing that right now in Syria. They're literally going around rejoicing. You see one guy filming himself, making people beg for their life, and then telling them it's going to be okay, and then shooting them and laughing, and then he turns around and you see about 5, 6 other young guys, just young radical jihadists who are probably addicted to porn and have no brain cells in their heads, and just uplifted and shouting Allahu Akbar and going and filming it, the same like you would imagine yourself making videos to share with the world when you go for a vacation in Spain or in Mexico or in the Caribbean. You want to show everybody what you're enjoying. So that's what they're doing. That's why they're live streaming it, because they enjoy this violence so much. Now here's the tricky part. Many of you in Europe and the US think like, oh my God, these radicals in the Middle East. But you know what? I got a surprise for you. A lot of these radicals are in your country right now. A lot of them are in Europe. I've met them, I've seen them, I've heard them, not once, not twice. I'm talking more than 1,000 times. I've heard these conversations, the same people that were probably right now watching these Instagram lives and reels and rejoicing and probably telling themselves while sitting in New York in these pro-Palestine demonstrations, or in Europe, in Germany, in Berlin, in France, and the UK, by far, definitely there's plenty, watching this and saying, I wish I was there, if only I could be there with my brothers out there doing what the Quran, what Allah have told us to do so. That is the kind of people that have infiltrated your countries. And what do you think? When you open your country, just say Merkel comes and says, welcome, we understand better than any Arab in the Middle East. You guys know nothing, we know better. We're going to welcome everyone. You think these radicals are not going to come to your country? Most of the immigration that came from the Middle East are military-aged males, and many of them literally came and burned or hidden they started covering their ID from before so they can come into your country and take advantage, because they see the West as weak. They see humanitarian rules and putting humans in the center as the most important thing. How can we help these people have a better life? They see that as a sign of weakness. They say, we don't care about that. We care about Allah. This is not important. And that's what the West doesn't understand, the difference between cultures. So you have them in your streets. You have people right now that are rejoicing and watching what's happening in Syria and are being exhilarated, just it's uplifting them. And that you go to a pro-Palestine demonstration, you're gonna find them in the numbers. They're gonna be like in a big chunk. I'm not saying all of them, but they're gonna be, most of them are gonna be there, because that's where they feel at home, because that's the same shared values that they have between Palestine, between Lebanon, between Syria, between all these places that used to be Christian, peaceful and safe, and then became Muslim, radical, and destroyed. And here we go again, another failing Muslim country finally had the chance to get rid of a dictator, and instead of building a beautiful future for themselves, have decided to become Al-Qaeda land, Taliban land, jihadist land, have decided to become actually even worse than how it is. So if anything you took from this video, it's the importance of sharing that with the world, because let me tell you something, Western media is not doing that. CNN, ABC, NBC, I don't know, all these pro-Palestine, pro-jihadist, radical, woke, narcissist, Western media, leftist company, whatever you want to call them, media outlets, the news companies. What they're doing is they're always covering the good guys and putting the focus on the good guys and looking to see how they can make the good guys look bad while hiding all the crime that the bad guys are doing. It's quite insane when you think about it. Think about how many false reports have they made about Israel on October 7 when Israel was just fighting for its existence and to go and bring back their kidnapped children. How many false reports just jumped on it, and how many times they covered for the Palestinians for the crime and the horrific thing they've done against their own people and against the Jews. And the same thing right now in Syria. Why aren't they covering it? It's like this. It feels like Western media having a flashlight, and they come and they say, all right, guys, let's see. Ooh, that's terrible what's happened in the Muslim world. We don't want to cover that. We don't want people to become Islamophobes, because if they see what's happening, they're going to become Islamophobes. So let's hide that from them. Let's look at Israel. Zoom in. Oh, I found a settler that said something stupid. Put it headlines. Put it all out there. The nation of Israel is talking about colonizing the entire Middle East. That's what they're doing. They take what he said and make it as if it's an official state. And then people hear that and say like, wow, these Jews, you know, they're crazy, they're insane. But then on the other side, you have Ahmed and other friends of his jihadists going around and doing a real genocide, or in Sudan, or in other places. And they will come in and say, okay, look here. Oh no, that's not good. That's not good. Hide that, hide that. And they're hiding it from the public, from you. Hence comes the questions, why are they doing that? How long can they keep doing that without being held accountable for that? And how come Hamas and Jawlani's radical Al-Qaeda Syria and Hezbollah, how come they all knew that they can count on CNN, on NBC, on ABC, and AP, and all these Western media woke outlets, news companies? How come they knew they can count on them to cover for them, to move the focus, to make Israel look bad, to blame it all on America, blame it all on the white colonizer that they made up, and cover for the radical jihadists? Because you see, modern day jihad, radical Islam, is basically the equivalent of Nazi Germany. It's like the more barbaric religious version of Nazi Germany. That's how it is. If you look at these guys and what they're doing right now in Syria, they're as evil as Nazi Germany, if not even more. Honestly, the Nazis, horrific things that they've done, but often the soldiers were getting so depressed and traumatized from just taking citizens, Jewish people, and piling them and just shooting them in the back of the head and dropping them into a trench again and again and again, and start feeling like, this is not what really we trained for as an army. We should be in the battlefield fighting, and that's not what it is. And many of them were getting depressed, were getting nightmares, I don't know what, and that's why the officers will give them drugs, prostitutes, and alcohol in the end of the day to help them forget what they just did, because it was, as evil as it was getting a bit too much for them as well. It was playing with their minds. With the Palestinians, with Hamas, with the government of Syria right now, with Hezbollah, you don't need to give them drugs. This is their drugs. They're getting so excited from doing that. You can see in their face, they're like, it's like the best day of their life. It's like that guy, this idiot, that every day dies from different things in Gaza, but he never really dies. He's just running around fooling the world. I don't know, Fufti, whatever his name. When he was running and saying, this is the happiest day of my life, about what happened, on October 7th, and so many journalists in Gaza were saying that. You're seeing that right now in Syria. Radical jihadists are extremely violent, and they enjoy suffering other humans, and not only that, they enjoy humiliating them. And that's why you see them making them march like dogs, or forcing the women to watch as they do whatever they want to the children before they kill the mothers and the grandmothers and etc. They enjoy it. And these are the kind of people right now that you have in Europe, in the United States. That's how disturbing this is. So please help share what's happening in Syria. Don't let Western media and the radical Islam cover for what's happening in Syria. It's terrible. And also help share that the only way for peace in the Middle East is by actually having peace with Israel, by actually allowing Israel to help them and helping Israel back. Because once you abandon this genocidal, jihadist, Muslim idea of destroying, conquering the world and destroying Israel, life is going to start becoming good for them. So if you want to help that to become the future, you have to start tackling the problems right now, which is exposing the horrific crimes that are happening in Syria under Islam, and not let anyone cover for them. And no, you're not an Islamophobe if you come and you point out these horrific, terrible things that are happening, and you start calling also your Muslim friends and neighbors, hey, what do you think about that? I want to hear what you think about that. And oh boy, you'll be surprised. If you ask that question, you will be surprised. Because if I start telling you, hey, but Israel, that's a jihadist. Immediately, you'd know that's a jihadist. That's someone that is trying to take the worst things that are happening under Islam and put it under the rug and blame Israel, blame America, and move the scope somewhere else so these things can keep happening. So I challenge you, go and see if you have, Muslim friends. I have great ones. But I know that these ones, I know where they're standing. I know what do they think about October 7th and about the other radicals. Because if they don't think that these things were terrible, they're not my friends. You don't want them as your friend. And you want to help these brave ones that are standing. You want to help them. You want to be with them. They should be the role models of how should Islam look in the future, not these radical jihadists and Jawlani who is just fooling Europe again and again. How easy it is to fool Europe. I think Europe would honestly not spot a Nazi under their nose. if he even shouts that he's a Nazi. I mean, obviously, they have these jihadists literally under their nose, and they're shouting very jihadist stuff, and they're not seeing any problem with that. So, yeah, it's just crazy how easily Europe has been fooled by Syria. And if you ask me, Jawlani is trying to look like now, like, yeah, we're trying to keep things under control. I understand how much the West want to believe that, but you know what? I don't believe that. For me, it looks like just another trick to keep kind of buying time as they're committing another genocide. Funny enough, it's not funny, but surprisingly enough, the only ones that are actually committing a genocide right now in the Middle East and pretty much in planet Earth are actually the Muslims. All the genocides are right now happening under Muslim countries, mostly. Maybe I missed something, but mostly. Sudan, Congo, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, all these places. It's always somehow under these Muslim countries. I'm not saying all, because there's a few that are trying to have a different path, but we can't ignore it. You gotta call it out for what it is. They need to take an example from Saudi Arabia, from the Emirates, who are trying a different path. That should be the one that we give the spotlights on. That. Be like them. Don't be like these guys. Don't be like Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt. Honestly, I mean, even Jordan and Egypt, Turkey, forget about that. They completely went to the dark side, and they're like happily declaring it. But anyway, guys, I spoke too much about this. I just wanted to give you a little bit of what's happening in the Middle East. I have people in Syria that I'm talking to on a daily basis, and I'm just on a vacation right now, so I'm trying to focus on family time. But I felt like this video is going to be very important, so I came and do it. And by the way, if you're wondering, yeah, I'm basically wearing the same shirt because I filmed this in the same day. I just changed the jacket, so it looks like I filmed this on another day. So anyway, guys, don't do anything stupid in general. In general, figure out what you're passionate about. I don't remember if I said that in the last video, so I'm going to say that again. Figure out what is the thing that you're passionate about. Sometimes in life, you can choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things to be fully devoted and passionate about. And be careful what you choose. And if you choose something like human rights, women's rights, I don't know what, make sure you understand what is it talking about, so you don't make a fool out of yourself like these college students in the US or in Europe. Because it's good to be passionate about something like worthy, like these good causes, but so often Western civilization, especially the young ones, the students, I call them the dumbest version of adults, especially the students, they just became adults. They have no clue what's happening in the world, and they get so easily tricked by all kind of nasty professors or narcissists who point them in the wrong direction, then become passionate about the wrong thing. They're calling out the good guys as bad guys while covering and defending the bad guys and trying to make them look like victims. Don't do that. So yeah, until the next time, guys, don't do anything stupid. In general, just don't do anything that I would do. Stay safe.